Hi, everyone. Before we get into the specifics of how to support clients on medication, I want to start with a quick overview of what we mean by MAT, or medication assisted treatment, here at JADE. MAT is the use of FDA approved medications to help treat substance use disorders, especially opioid use disorder and alcohol use disorder. These aren't random prescriptions, each one is backed by research and selected based on the client's needs. For opioids, that might include something like Suboxone or Vivitrol, and for alcohol, that could be oral or injectable naltrexone, acamprosate, or even disulfiram, depending on the client. But, and this is key, JADE doesn't see MAT as a standalone treatment. It's one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Every client who engages in MAT here is also participating in counseling, group and individual. Some may also be prescribed other psychiatric medications if that's clinically appropriate for them. It's all part of our integrated approach. Now, just to clear up any confusion, MAT is offered, not required. Nobody is pressured into taking medication, and nobody is shamed for choosing not to. Our job is to give people options, provide education, and support whatever path to recovery they choose. And that's really the heart of it. MAT at JADE is about access, not coercion, support, not stigma. So let's take a few minutes to talk about how MAT actually works. And don't worry, you don't need a medical degree for this part. We are going to go a little bit deeper than it just helps with cravings. So let's start at the core. When somebody becomes dependent on a substance, whether it's opioids, alcohol, or something else, their brain chemistry changes. Over time, the brain stops making certain neurotransmitters on its own and starts relying on the substance to do the work instead. It's not about willpower, it's about biology. So let's zoom into how some of these most common substances actually work in the brain because it helps explain why certain medications can be so helpful later during recovery. Starting with alcohol, it's tricky. It doesn't affect just one neurotransmitter, it messes with several major systems, which is why it can feel relaxing and reckless at the same time. Alcohol increases GABA activity, and GABA is the brain's main brake pedal. It slows everything down, and that's what gives alcohol its calming, sedative effect. While it's increasing GABA, it's also blocking glutamate, which is the brain's gas pedal, the system that keeps us alert and engaged. This adds to that slowed down, foggy feeling. And then talking about endorphins and the mu opioid receptor, this one surprises people. Alcohol also increases the release of endorphins, or the body's natural opioids. And these endorphins bind to the mu receptor site, triggering feelings of pleasure and reward, just like heroin or other opioids do. And that's part of why alcohol feels good to some people, and why naltrexone, an opioid blocker, can actually help reduce alcohol cravings too. So when somebody drinks, their brain is getting a triple hit: sedated, disinhibited, and rewarded. And over time, these systems get dysregulated, which is why people may feel anxious, restless, or depressed when they stop drinking, even if they're no longer physically withdrawing. Opioids, whether heroin, fentanyl, or pills, go straight for those mu opioid receptor sites. These are the little locks throughout the brain and body that regulate pain, pleasure, and stress. So when somebody uses opioids, the drug binds to the mu opioid receptor and activates them fully if it's a full agonist like heroin or methadone. And this causes a huge release of dopamine, which is the brain's feel good reward chemical. This result is pain relief, warmth, euphoria, and a sense of deep relaxation, or even numbness. And over time, the brain starts producing less dopamine on its own. So when somebody stops using, not only do they feel physical withdrawal, but they also seem to have low motivation, low pleasure, and low drive, which can be incredibly hard to push through without support. And stimulants like methamphetamine or cocaine also operate differently. Instead of calming the brain, they jack up the release of dopamine and block its reabsorption, causing it to hang around longer in the brain. And this results in a rush of energy, euphoria, focus, and confidence. But the crash afterwards can be brutal. Long term stimulant use burns out the dopamine system, which can leave people feeling exhausted, foggy, depressed, and unable to feel motivated or engaged in everyday life. That's why early recovery from stimulants is often marked by anhedonia, or the inability to feel pleasure, and why meds like bupropion and modafinil are sometimes explored for support. Medication assisted treatment helps rebalance the system. These medications will work in a few different ways. So, starting with agonists, agonists fully activate a receptor just like the drug would. Methadone is an example. It's a full agonist at that mu receptor site. It binds to the receptor and gives a consistent, predictable effect, which helps prevent withdrawal and reduce cravings without the chaos of short acting street opioids. We don't prescribe methadone here at JADE, but it is helpful to understand it for context, especially since clients may talk about it or come from a methadone program. Moving on to partial agonists, these ones bind to the same receptor, that mu receptor site, but only partially activate it. Buprenorphine in Suboxone, Subutex, Brixadi, and Sublocade is a great example. It satisfies the receptor just enough to stop withdrawal and cravings, but without the full high or euphoric feeling. So think of it like putting a dimmer switch on a light instead of flipping it on or off all the way. And the bonus here is that buprenorphine has a super strong affinity. It grabs that receptor site and holds it tight, so other opioids can't easily take its place. And that's why it also acts as a blocker when somebody tries to use substances on top of it. And then looking at antagonists. So, antagonists are blockers. They bind to the receptor site but don't activate it at all. Naltrexone is one of those. It's like a big beach ball shoved into that lock. If somebody tries to use opioids or alcohol while on naltrexone, it really won't do anything. They won't feel it because the receptor is blocked. And it only works after somebody has fully detoxed, since blocking the receptor too soon can cause what's called precipitated withdrawal. So, why does this even matter? Because understanding how these meds works helps us see what they're really doing. They're not erasing addiction and they're not curing anything, but they are giving people a little bit more space from cravings, space from withdrawal, space from the roller coaster of early recovery, so that they can actually focus on the real work of getting better: therapy, relationships, meaning, and building a life worth staying sober for. It's like giving somebody a walking stick when they're trying to climb a hill. The stick won't do the walking for them, but it does make it easier to stay upright when the ground's uneven. And just like therapy, MAT is not a one size fits all. Some people only need it for a few months, others might benefit from a longer term support. And there's no gold star from getting off meds early. And there's no shame in continuing it if it's working. The right answer is it depends on the person, their goals, their body, their story. As support staff, our job is not to decide that for them. It's just to help them understand the options and to walk with them while they figure it out. So let's get into the nuts and bolts, the actual medications that we offer here at JADE, and the ones that clients might bring up even if we don't prescribe them. So let's start with opioid use disorder, or OUD. At JADE, we prescribe several medications that contain buprenorphine, which is that partial opioid agonist. And what that means is that it activates the opioid receptors in the brain just enough to help with cravings, withdrawal, but not enough to create a full high or euphoria. It blocks other opioids from bindings, which can help prevent relapse or even overdose. And these are some of the name brands that you're going to hear most often. Suboxone, this one contains buprenorphine and naloxone, and it's usually a sublingual film or tablet, which just means that it goes underneath the tongue. Subutex is also buprenorphine, but it's just buprenorphine alone. There's no naloxone in the formulation, and we will only prescribe this to clients who are pregnant or breastfeeding. Brixadi is a newer option. It's a weekly or monthly injection, and Sublocade is a monthly injection of extended release buprenorphine. These medications are a great fit for people who want steady coverage for cravings and withdrawal without needing to take a pill every day, especially the injectable forms like Brixadi and Sublocade. And also, just so that you know, buprenorphine has that very strong affinity to the mu opioid receptor site. It latches on tight. So, thinking of that mu receptor like a lock, buprenorphine is like a well fitting key that opens the door just enough and blocks anything else from jamming in. Once it's in, other opioids can't really push it out. And then looking at naltrexone, or brand names Revia and Vivitrol. This one we're going to use for both opioid and alcohol use disorder, and it comes in two forms. Revia is the daily pill, and Vivitrol is the long-acting injection that's given monthly or every 28 days. Unlike buprenorphine, naltrexone is an opioid antagonist, and that means it doesn't activate the receptor at all. It just sits on it and blocks it, like that big beach ball that's shoved into a lock. If somebody tries to use opioids while on naltrexone, they won't feel the effect. But the catch is that clients have to be fully detoxed before starting it, otherwise it can throw them into withdrawal. It's a good fit for people who are opioid free, don't want to use another opioid-based medication like buprenorphine or methadone, and want a non-addictive option. And then just a note on methadone. JADE doesn't prescribe methadone, but clients will bring it up, and it's important that we understand what it is. So methadone is a full opioid agonist. It activates the opioid receptors completely and is very effective at stopping withdrawal and reducing cravings. But because it has a high overdose risk and a long half-life, methadone has to be administered in a special clinic setting with strict rules. Clients who've been on methadone might mention something called blind dosing, where they don't always know the amount that they're getting. They might talk about early mornings because the clinics open really early and require daily attendance, especially early on in their recovery or their treatment. And just so you're aware, common doses of methadone generally range from 40 to 120 milligrams a day. And it's a very different experience than getting a prescription for Suboxone or a Vivitrol injection. It's also more highly structured, which can be helpful for some clients, but just not a good fit for others. And so, shifting into alcohol use disorder or AUD, we offer some medications for these. And I'm just going to talk about three. So, the first one is disulfiram, which is also known as the brand name Antabuse. And this one makes drinking feel physically awful. If somebody drinks alcohol while taking Antabuse, they'll experience symptoms like nausea, flushing, racing heart, and more. And it's designed to create a strong negative association with drinking or an aversion. The next medication, acompressate, or the brand name Campral. And this one helps reduce cravings, especially in people who have already stopped drinking and also want some help staying sober. It works by calming down the overactive brain systems that can make early sobriety feel so hard. And then again, naltrexone. Yes, this one is also used for alcohol too, just like it's used for opioids. It helps reduce the rewarding effects of alcohol. Clients may still drink, but they're not getting the same buzz, which can help reduce binge episodes or total consumption. So each of these has a different fit depending on somebody's goals, their body, their history, and what they're willing to try. And that's why it's so important that we never suggest specific medications. That's up to the prescriber to do. So let's talk for a minute about comfort meds. These are not part of MAT, but are often prescribed alongside MAT, especially when somebody's in early recovery or going through withdrawal. Clients might not always know the difference between MAT and comfort meds, so it's helpful for us just to be clear when we explain it. Two of the most common comfort meds that we use here at JADE are clonidine, and this helps with sweating, anxiety, and restlessness, especially during opioid withdrawal. It's a blood pressure med that also helps calm the nervous system down a bit. And then there's hydroxyzine, which is also known by the brand name of Vivitrol. And this is often prescribed for anxiety, trouble sleeping, and sometimes itchiness or general discomfort. It's not habit forming and can be a helpful bridge in early recovery. These meds can make a huge difference in helping people feel just a little more settled when they're first stopping substance use. It doesn't treat the addiction itself, but it can make the process less overwhelming, which means that people are more likely to stay engaged in treatment. Now, here's something else that's important to know about JADE. There are certain medications that we won't prescribe, including gabapentin, also known as Neurontin. These can be habit forming, and sometimes clients will ask for it, and some places will prescribe it as a comfort med. JADE just doesn't. There's also benzodiazepines like Xanax, Ativan, Valium, and we're going to avoid prescribing these because they're habit forming and the risk outweighs the benefit in our treatment model. So if a client is prescribed one of these by an outside provider, our medical team will review it, but generally we don't co-prescribe or support long-term use of these medications here. And the bottom line is that comfort meds are supportive, not primary treatment. And while they're not considered MAT, they're still part of the care plan for some clients, and understanding their purpose helps us talk with them clearly and without judgment. All right, so next up, let's talk briefly about medications that might be used to support somebody through stimulant withdrawal, like cocaine or methamphetamine. And these are not standard MAT options. They aren't FDA approved specifically for substance use disorder, but research here is ongoing and developing. And in some cases, prescribers may consider these on a case by case basis. So some of the meds that you might hear mentioned include disulfiram, that's Antabuse again, and that's the same one used for alcohol. Modafinil is generally used for sleep disorders, but can help with fatigue or focus. Topiramate, or brand name Topamax, is a seizure med sometimes used off-label for cravings. Bupropion, also known as Wellbutrin, is an antidepressant that might help with motivation. Methylphenidate, like Ritalin, also helps with attention and focus. And doxazosine is a blood pressure med, may help reduce Q reactivity, and sometimes even naltrexone, though the evidence is still emerging there. So at JADE, these are not standard practice, but in specific situations, our medical providers may consider them as part of a larger treatment plan. As counselors or CRS staff, we don't recommend these ourselves. We just support the care plan if it's been made. If a client asks about one of these, the best response is pretty simple. And you can just say, that's something that you can bring up with your prescriber. I'm not a medical provider, but we can make sure that that conversation happens. So let's wrap up with one of the most important parts of this training: how to talk to your clients in a way that's clear, supportive, and within your role. Here's the key: we don't make medical recommendations, but we do help clients explore their options. And that starts with normalizing MAT as a valid recovery pathway. You might say something like, MAT is one of the options that some people use in recovery. It's not for everybody, but for some folks, it really helps take the edge off early on. Or you can say something like, you can always ask your provider about medication options. If that's something you're curious about, I can help you get in touch or schedule an appointment with you. And that kind of language just opens the door without pushing. It respects client autonomy, which is core to our approach at JADE. Some clients will be interested, some won't. Okay. Your job isn't to convince, it's to support. If a client brings up cravings or says that they're struggling, it's totally fine to say that MAT might help you get a little more stability if cravings have become intense. but that's the conversation for your prescriber. That keeps the tone non-judgmental, non-directive, and safe. What we don't do is say that somebody needs MAT. We don't recommend a specific medication. And we definitely don't make promises like this will fix your cravings or you won't feel withdrawal. Why? Because some people respond differently, and we're not prescribing providers. Even with the best intentions, that kind of advice can overstep and backfire. So if you're not sure what to say, just come back to this. That's something that you can talk about with your provider. Do you want me to set up a time that you can check in with them? It's simple, it's respectful, and it's on point. And it also helps remind clients, especially when they're frustrated or looking for quick relief, that MAT isn't magic. It doesn't cure addiction, it's a support, not a solution. And the research is clear. MAT works best when it's paired with counseling. That's why our model includes both medication when appropriate and therapy to help people make sense of their lives, learn skills, and rebuild trust in themselves. At the end of the day, our role is just to walk alongside people in recovery, never ahead of them, never dragging them forward, just walking with them, offering information, helping them navigate their options, and respecting whatever pace they're at. All right, so let's bring it all together. The biggest takeaway here is that MAT is a client choice, not a requirement, and not something we push. Our job is to make sure that clients know it's available, that it's valid, and that it's okay to ask questions. You don't need to be a medical expert, you just need to understand the basics, stay with your role, and know when to loop in the prescriber. If a client wants to learn more, help them make that connection, and that's it. And above all, keep the conversation non judgmental, curious, and supportive. Everybody's recovery path looks different. Some will want medication, some won't. What matters is that we meet them where they are, not where they think they should be. Thanks for learning with us and for being a part of the team that gives people options without pressure, care without shame, and a space to figure out what recovery means to them.